Right, like to go through the round, you're speaking for the people right now. Opening up next. Opening up.
Darren seconds of preference.
Michael first, no preference.
Stephen P. with A, please.
Paul first, no preference.
Tom second P.
Right. Then, without further ado, I'd like to open this debate and look forward to Prime Minister.
There's a pretty simple reason why you have to go to medical school for about 6 to 10 years to become a fully qualified doctor. It's because even if you have all of the facts at your disposal, putting them together in the right order and in the right way is an incredibly difficult job. We want to contend from opening government is that the predominance of these sorts of websites has become an easy out for people who want some kind of medical information, has tremendously substituted better medical care for these people and done a lot of harm to people's lives. Let's be clear what we think the substitution is in this debate. I think that the alternative, in the absence of these sort of like commercial or privately run sites, would probably be governments having their own websites to disseminate core pieces of information, and then heavy suggestions they should seek consults or get like, in the very worst case, if you have absolutely no access to a doctor, doing something like an online consult with a real doctor. We think critically, in terms of like having ease of access to information, a government can give the readily available, simple information for the diseases that are genuinely easy to treat very easily online. The great problem we have is with the diversity of things these websites often claim to be able to solve. I'll make two arguments. First of all, why we get worse healthcare, and second of all, why this substitutes checkups with actual doctors. First of all, why do we get worse healthcare? I think the first thing you should understand is that a lot of these websites simply do have bad information. The fact that people are now in a habit of going online for the medical information, and there is a belief that you can go and like diagnose yourself online, the information is equal to that you would get from a doctor, means that people have started to use things. There's a lot of ridiculous stuff on the internet, right? People who tell them stuff that is either just pseudoscience or things that are like questionably good for treating disease, like chiropractic medicine or whatever. These sorts of things do actually have a real substitute for the sort of future medical stuff that people choose to access. In a practical sense, that means they get simply worse treatment and that people don't actually cure the diseases that they have. So the second thing, the reason that it's bad is even if we're not talking about websites that are just like run by quacks or pseudoscience, and like it's actually doctors who are behind at the end of the day, the first incentive these websites have is simply to sell you stuff. Remember that these are private commercial enterprises. They're not something like government or a website whose incentive is to actually just cure diseases. The thing that these websites need to do to succeed is make people want to keep using their website or be able to sell advertising space. To a large extent, that results in two things. The first of those things is making a format that makes you want to come back and use it again, or making one that people, like makes them feel as though they need to be back on the website in some respect to keep traffic being very high. Now that, in many instances, could easily be seen to be very distinct from what proper medical care is. It can lead to things like people getting hypochondria because they go and like read on a website like, I had like symptom X, like a pain here and a twinge there, maybe I've got bowel cancer, and this sort of stuff. The other thing that it can sort of do is allow make these websites try to sell you a lot of material. Let's be very clear, there is a very large amount of people who want to sell pharmaceutical products to a very large range of people. These websites, to the extent they can get a lot of money from advertising a particular drug or a particular treatment, knowing that if a patient that goes on to the doctor and demands that sort of drug, that companies who are making more money, is a tremendous incentive towards pushing people in the direction of worse drugs and worse healthcare. It is better when the doctor is the first port of call and is the one actually making those decisions to a large extent, because they often have far more like obvious and accountable duties to the patient with the respect that if they are the ones being paid off and then they prescribe you a drug that is objectively worse, they are very personally liable for it. Whereas a website can just say like, look, our medical advice for them is be absolute, we genuinely think this drug is better in general or whatever. And the third reason that I think it is like likely to be worse information is it is super difficult to keep healthcare stuff up to date. Let's be very clear. Even if you like read every single research paper that comes out and you genuinely have the intent to try and be on top of like proper medical care, that sort of stuff is incredibly difficult to keep up to date and accurate in real time. The problem is these websites don't need to be accurate and up to date at all times. They don't need to actually be giving you the best treatments. All they need to do is have some version of reality that you think is plausible enough when you're incredibly uninformed to make you believe this website is actually useful. And in that regard, we would prefer that people accessing a government-run website, which is likely to be far more pressure on itself to stay up to date, or simply go and talk to a doctor who, again, is far more likely to give you up-to-date information. The second way in which I think you get worse healthcare is that it makes your actual interactions with doctors far worse. Let's be very clear. When you read one of these websites, even if you then go on to see an actual doctor, you come in with preconceived notions of what your symptoms are and what the cure for that sort of thing should be. The particular difficulty of this is twofold. First of all, with respect to you having a belief about what your symptoms actually are, you can say things to your doctor that lead to misdiagnoses. If you read what the type bunch of symptoms you think, I might have this disease, and you read the other symptoms, you start to read back that list of things to a doctor. That's a very real difficulty for people with things like back pain or knee pain, where it is very subjective often, and having a preconceived notion on the part of an uneducated person, being incredibly likely to increase the chance of getting a misdiagnosis. The second reason in which it makes it worse is that you have a preconceived notion of what the treatment you want. You might have read online the cure for your knee thing is a steroid injection as opposed to an operation or something. I'm talking about this because my dad's a spine surgeon, but like, look, the particular reason why this is particularly bad is that like the sort of difference between those treatments is very real. A doctor can't actually force you to use one treatment or other. A doctor, like, medical training, as far as I'm aware, basically, like, you can't tell a patient they're an idiot and they have to do this sort of thing. You have to either persuade them or just live with them accepting a particular kind of treatment. To the extent that people come in with very strong preconceived notions of what is going to cure them because they read a very moving but absolute garbage thing online about this sort of stuff, it's very difficult for a doctor to break that cycle and actually get the proper treatment for the relevant patient.
When you don't have a source that relies on its reputation in order to have people going back to it, are you more or less likely to rely on folk knowledge and received wisdom rather than that objective information?
I just don't think that the alternative to like e-health websites is like you asking like Timothy down the street how to cure your back pain, right? Like, I think realistically, if there are government-run websites that are equally accessible and have similar information, you're probably going to go to that. And to the extent that it is not that difficult to go to a GP, you're probably likely to go to do that sort of thing. That actually leads me on to my second argument, which is why this substitutes actual checkups. Let's be very clear, the preventative medicine, thank you, is often incredibly useful in a large degree of context. Things like, examining someone for prostate or breast cancer can catch it at a very early stage. Making lifestyle changes to prevent things like diabetes can save billions of dollars of health funding and also dramatically improve the quality of people's lives. I think the very specific problem is that a lot of these checks and the things that you need to do can only really be done in person by an actual doctor, right? You can't substitute a prostate exam by reading something online, no matter how hard you objectively try. And to the extent that the rise of these websites and the belief and the habit of people trying to like diagnose themselves with just words online rather than actual physical checkup with a doctor, that has made the sort of preventative measures far worse. And let's be very clear, let's say that on net, more people are considering their healthcare on their side, but a much higher proportion of people on our side were going to the doctor. We think we still win that balance for a very specific reason. It is that when you go to a doctor, you get a pretty holistic checkup if you go to someone like a GP. They talk about all aspects of your health. They catch things you didn't even know you should be considering. That is why getting access to real doctors in person is far more important than even the sheer amount of knowledge or the amount of people who are considering their health. Because the average person is so uninformed and so unable to actually do good things for their health that we need to prevent that substitution towards being away from actual doctors. At the end of the day, there is a lot of quackery on the internet. It is very hard to get it right, even if you're not reading something written by a quack. Prefer people go to doctors, prefer they read the government or website of the base.
Thank you for that speech. I'd like to welcome the Leader of the Opposition.
Three bits of rebuttal, followed by an argument of why it's quite significantly better information. Second of all, why we win on their metric of getting people into the examining halls of hospitals. First thing John tells us is that WebMD and such websites have an incentive to sell you stuff and an incentive to make you come back and use it. The first thing I would note is many official medical organizations, be it a hospital or a private clinic, has a similar incentive to sell you those things as well. So it's not all clear why the information they provide would be differently motivated. But second of all, note, if WebMD gives you a particular treatment and pushes it really hard in a sort of biased way that they think happens, as opposed to presenting you with a range of options, and it goes dreadfully wrong for you, then fine, they can like sort of justify it perhaps legally. But the point is that person's never going to come back and use that again, which means less word traffic, less word of mouth that spreads, and often in communities or like hotspots and areas, that means a significant drop in traffic and the sources of revenue they care about. Ergo, lots of these companies have been incented to present these options as fairly neutral or give you the choice by weighing up pros and cons between them. It isn't sort of like it's a picture they think it is. The second thing they say is it is hard to keep this information up to date. I mean, what's the comparative here, right? Like, surely the stretched NHS budget, who cares about putting nurses and doctors in the halls of hospitals in London? Well, thank you. has way less budget and incentive to keep this random website that no one probably cares that much about. On the contrary, when your entire business model is based on the idea of web traffic, you have an incentive to say things like, we've updated it based on WHO's most recent report to draw people in. Or the down of line service providers that you're advertising on behalf of are likely to pressure you to make this information accurate to ensure that clients and customers continue to flow in more accurate information and sooner on us than us. The last thing they say is that individuals will now come into doctors with preconceived notions that this screws things up. Number one, it presumes doctors are generally benevolent. I just don't think this is true. Doctors very often want to push a particular type of research, no thank you, or a particular type of agenda based on sort of where they stand in the medical academic field. As a result, giving individuals information to ask questions like, oh, but what about this side effect that they know about because of things like WebMD is hugely empowering to be able to make that choice. That more on that later on. Last thing I like to say is that if this is truly the harm of information, then surely government sites to provide similar levels of information are subject to this harm as well. The only way to get a comparative win here is if they acknowledge that government websites are to an extent vaguer, more ambiguous, or absent of that information entirely, and that's where we think the trade-off isn't worth it. First argument, better information than the alternative. The first observation I want to make is that in some countries, there simply isn't a budget for an official alternative, and it's only to get this money out of nowhere. But let's move beyond that. The second thing I'd say is that most popular websites are those which design the most web traffic. That is to say, they do things like try and link to the information sources that the NHS uses or other official bodies use, but claim to bring it all together in a way that is convenient for you. The same way that, I don't know, Skyscanner does the same thing and makes it their business model. That is to say, a lot of this information isn't falsified, it isn't even made up. It's a lot cheaper and easier to take it off other parts of the web or other physical copies and replicate it in a central location. Ergo, it's not inaccurate. The third thing to say here is why that government website isn't sufficient. I mean, this sounds a bit bizarre, but some people just don't trust the government, right? Like, there is in many parts of the world sort of conspiracy theories and stuff who believe that when it comes to super severe matters of things like health and privacy, the government is particularly agenda. But more importantly, people want corroborating evidence from multiple sources. So the first thing you search on Google might be the NHS, but they often want a second or third opinion. And that's where the illusion of having a private body without an interest in this particular case giving you similar diagnoses of the things you have is hugely empowering to your site. The last thing to say here is like the fairly litigious environment of the US, it means that these websites are disincented to make super out of left field claims about the effectiveness and thank you of these treatments because there's a huge chance of being hauled up in court and made to prove the veracity of these claims. What is the impact of this? The impact is that on our side of the house, there's significantly more assuagement when it comes to feelings of fear and anxiety as to the symptoms you're facing. Why? Because we think it breaks a significant confirmation bias that comes from looking at a symptom in the morning and feeling shit. Whatever I have, because thank you, a particularly damaging condition. So in the status quo right now, you think about the symptoms you have, you sort of go, oh, maybe I have cancer, you search for that, and then that sort of leads you to a cycle of confirming that. On our side of the house, that changes. Why? On these centrally controlled websites, as opposed to the NHS version where it says, do you have cancer? Here are some conditions. The fact that there's a hub and network of information means two things. Number one, it means that you type in the symptoms you have, and one of those things might be the worst case scenario. But so you also see that the symptom you have, like dizziness or knee pain, or thank you, is also associated with significantly many other more trivial and less serious diseases. So like, I guess like a Bayesian probability thing, you sort of update your probabilities and go, oh, maybe I have cancer, but at least it could be all these other things and I should get those things checked out. It gives you that immediate hit of feeling less fearful of the state of your life. The second thing that happens is you immediately see information about other courses of treatment. Why? Commercial incentive to present you all this information. So thank you, so that they get revenue from you clicking on and moving to those websites to seek those treatments. And knowing what those courses of treatment are, being able to ask your doctor questions about the pros and cons of those things is massively empowering. Because doctors often try to push certain treatments on you, and being able to push back against those things means that you're more empowered as a patient to make a choice that trades these things off based on what your life requires. Go ahead.
Alright, so if I'm out of breath, my instinctive reaction might be that, maybe I need to go to the gym or I'm just a bit stressed, etc. When I go onto your website, it lists a whole host of horrific things it could be. Why is that not going to make me more worried rather than less worried?
Cool. So I think that's not exactly the type of case we're talking about, right? So the less worried case is when you've got a potentially very frightening symptom and it helps you reevaluate. This is the other side of the argument we're going to make now. Even if it does potentially exaggerate what you think you have, that's a good thing if you get to the doctors getting that checkup when you do see signs of struggling at the gym, because that's the kind of thing which in 99% of the cases is fine, but in the 1% of cases leads to a heart attack 2 weeks on, and this means we save their lives. Why does that happen? The trade-off here, I think, is twofold. On best case for that side, you get a short-term stress if you didn't actually have a heart disease and got a little bit short of breath in the interim between going to the doctor and finding out about this and what then. I guess the second trade-off they might make at some point in the budget just crowds out state healthcare services. Everyone goes to get a checkup. Presumably they can't do so because they suggested it's a good thing for people to go to doctors. Why are we okay with that trade-off? Because the heightened urgency to go to the doctor, this overestimation of the risk of disease that could potentially kill you, is fine. We think it's a trade-off worth fighting because more than not, people significantly underestimate the chances of low probability but high impact things happening in their daily lives. That's why when you feel short of breath after a tennis match, as my uncle did, you don't think maybe it'll be a heart attack coming on. You just think, well, I'm old and out of shape. We think the comparative here is that when people know about the probabilities, the possibilities of all these terrible things happening, whether irrationally or rationally, we think both sides of the house, you could have a rational MDG, but also an irrational sort of average person in the street look at this and sort of make a decision either way. You get people to those doctors saying, well, I need a treatment for this. So let's be clear, right? If it's the most serious type of disease, they're not just going to pop a pill and be done with that. To access those types of treatments, they're going to need a medical practitioner to certify them and move them on in the next stage of that treatment. That's why they're not going to end up treating themselves. More often than not, in the worst cases, if you want to prevent the high impact cases, you're going to get to healthcare services, which either diagnose them accurately, in which case we save their life, or worst case scenario for us, it's not, and they go back to the gym. For all these reasons, Toronto goes.
Thank you for that speech. I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister.
If they're right that the vast majority of these e-health sites are just linking you to the government sites, then presumably there's two implications. One, people don't trust the government, all harm still accrue. Two, like on a trivial note, like if you are just linking information, presumably there also needs to have to be some more false information out there when you have a huge number of multiplicity of these sites. We think more bad information is bad, it's only good information that's good. As a general frame for this debate, it's probably not a debate about rights and meaningful sense of regret mission, nor is it a debate how we would like to organise healthcare or regulate e-health as it is. It's about a world where either e-healthcare exists or the most plausible alternative exists, which we've outlined quite recently, is government-provided services, and seems to be quite implicit in the info slide itself. So there's sort of two things in this speech. Firstly, the use of government e-services and why they are significantly better. Secondly, the substitution effect. All this has to be doctors and why we think that's something that is problematic, but why it's less of an issue when we have government services picking up the speaker. And just to start with this thing on government services versus private ones. So Teck says some countries don't have enough money to be able to develop the service themselves. The internet is global and other countries exist. As a consequence, if you have access to the internet, which you need to do to have any of the benefits on any side of the house, you can use other countries. And presumably if your country doesn't have one, it'll be using, or Google will naturally put you to another country's one if you type in any separate thing regarding health on Google. Similarly, all this need to corroborate information they push back. If there are multiple countries, all of which presumably will be aiming to have their own service there, which they will access as much as possible, you still have the ability to corroborate information. So all the things they talk about, the importance of everything multiplicity, we get. The only difference is that everything on our side is regulated, everything is generally government-based. We think that's something that is significant. So let's weigh up the different points of knowledge and points of access. Private corporations have a profit incentive. Some might be altruistic, but the vast majority are unlikely to be. Government-regulated websites, in the best case, like NHS Online, do not have this incentive and are only there to provide information that is beneficial to the public. And that's something that is a good thing. Even if it is the case, there are still some private corporations based around regulated healthcare. We still think the information they provide is significantly better, given the huge degree of professional indemnity insurance they have to pay if anything goes wrong. And that's something that is significantly important. So why is it important people using government websites on our side? And I'd just like to respond to the weird questions I got from closing up. Because their logic is that businesses need reputation. People are perfect economists and know that they need their reputation and therefore trust them because market incentives mean they would work. Couple of responses to this. Firstly, most people probably don't think like this. They trust the info in front of them and the websites that look legitimate. And if you are in any way half decent at selling a service, you will A, try to make the website look as professional as possible, and B, you'll probably do things like pay to make it the first hit on Google and displace what would otherwise be the government service that people would access if it were the first hit on Google. Private corporations have the incentive to place government-based sources of healthcare. We don't have that problem on our side. And similarly, on the problem of anti-vaxxers not trusting it, that's probably a problem for them themselves. They're not going to listen to any basic healthcare. We don't think there's much we can do to save them realistically. But realistically, the point is again that they're actually linked to other government services, presumably that is harmful on both sides of the house. So how does this then play out in sort of different things for healthcare alternatives? Like John gave a number of reasons, none of really which got adequate responses. The first one is that you want to push certain forms of treatment. And this sort of applies in two ways, which really didn't get enough. The first one is that you have absolute quacks. This means they have a near legitimacy when they are online. You don't have to actually know their real qualifications, but it is just a website that is perceiving, gives you a perception of trust you otherwise might not have. And that means they're push treatments that they want to sell. We've been told there are problems because people can be litigious. Like if you're a quack and you sell completely ineffectual treatment, that's not harmful in and of itself. You can't be sued for that. But the consequence is that if there's something serious you have wrong with you, you die because you don't get adequate treatment. We think that's a significant harm, but the current legal system doesn't actually provide for it. There's a lacuna in the law, and we find that extraordinarily problematic. Secondly, even if it's just this weird neutral presentation, you are heavily going to be biased towards selling certain forms of things because presumably that's how you make money. And if that is the case, we think that's something that again is extraordinarily dangerous. You're pushing people and trying to make it as neutral as possible, but everything sort of leads to the same conclusion. This is ultimately what you want to. And presumably again, you're not going to sell something actively dangerous, but it is something unlikely to be the most effective means of treating people. And if you base it on consequences that most people end up getting treated less well and have more pain in their lives, that is something we still think is a significant harm to the vast majority of people.
So the second half of John's speech was about supposed harms that happen when patients are able to access information about symptoms that they may have. If the government is also providing that information as per your model, how does that not create exactly the kind of harms that he was talking about, if you believe that? Why is the second half
here's the tip. No, it's completely wrong. The problem is when we have websites that push you towards certain things, the ultimate consequence that they also have is to say that certain forms of symptoms are resulting in certain diseases. They may have, I don't know, a private corporation paying to try and push people towards, because that would be a logical profit. When it's a government source, it's always going to be saying you should always seek doctors' advice, that they are always the ones who know best, and that they are the ones who need to get the ultimate diagnosis in this case. That's why it's completely different, and that's why it's completely successful from our side. What are the other four issues we pretty much have with these forms of websites as they exist in the market? Firstly, it is the thing that the facts are not as accurate. This is extraordinarily important and never gets responses. Because ultimately, if you're a government website, you have an absolute obligation to the duty to your people to keep looking up the most recent forms of medical journals being passed and figure out what the most relevant information and best facts are. If you're a private organization, you probably have to do this for all the ones who are the most knowledgeable that everyone's going to go through. But it's sort of weird, more unique case of diseases, you don't have the same incentive to be constantly updating and constantly looking towards. Because realistically, even if you're losing the one person who comes and ultimately looks at the disease and then you act on bad information, though, sort of profit incentive of they might move away. Like again, it's one person who happens very rarely, so you're able to take that one after you've got them there in the first place. Secondly, the fact that as a private corporation, you can just shut down the website and start up a new one, and no one's going to know who you are behind the web address. And that means that ultimately all the normal constraints that exist on businesses that reputation don't apply in the online sphere because there is not that permanence of a fixed entity. No one knows who ultimately owns the address when they look at this. Thirdly, it's not just basic things like sensationalism. You need, in an online environment, you need money. The way you get that is you need people to click on your website. That does mean you have some element of sensationalism. You think people will want to come back to you and will want to seek your advice above other people. It is something that everything is going, it's trying to tell people that things are going terrible and they need to go to you to figure out what it might be. We think even if it's not going to be the most extreme possible case, any element of sensationalism in healthcare that makes people do irrational things is probably bad for them, and we'd like to see less. Fifthly, it's probably just an element that they try to trap you into them to some degree of repeat usage that's pointed out by text. We think that's something that is not the intent to push people towards a doctor that cures their problems, but keep having people coming back and back looking for more and more symptoms. I think all of that is bad. Secondly, briefly, substitution effect in doctors. Like John points out how this can make you extraordinarily confrontational within a healthcare system. We think that's something that is problematic in terms of getting worse treatment for you, but also in the case that you're just wasting time until doctors are convinced they know what's best. Which again, by contrast, when government websites are able to consistently say that doctors do know best and you should listen to their opinion, is something that is less problematic. In terms of doctors, we accept they have imperfections. We accept they have some perverse incentives themselves. The difference is they have significantly fewer. And more importantly, they are taught explicitly how to look for common forms of misdiagnosis in certain symptoms. They're more likely to get the correct treatment. basic impact of that, people aren't misdiagnosed, people don't die because they get terrible treatments for what is actually a serious illness. We think that's a significant harm. We're very happy with that.
Thank you for that speech. I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
There are two general classes of complaints the opening government makes this debate. Firstly, they give us a bunch of direct attacks on e-health websites and why they think they don't work. Secondly, they claim that they substitute for proper medical treatment, and that's a worse outcome. So let's look at these two cases in turn. Firstly, in terms of the direct attacks on e-health, right? So there's two classes of claim they make here. First, they say e-health websites provide bad information. We have three responses to this. Number one, there is an incentive to keep up traffic to your site by providing good information, which over time makes you reliable and shifts you further up the Google search algorithm, right? Because bear in mind that a website doesn't make its name one day and overnight get a tremendous amount of traffic. It takes time for you to build up the reputation and a consistent base of people who are using it, discovering that it is helpful to them or isn't like grossly misdiagnosing them and makes them likely to come back. What are the nuances of this argument they give us? Firstly, it takes points out to you that this is amplified by the current litigious environment visually. They say there's a lacuna in the law, sure, but the more these websites exist, the more they tend to proliferate, the more likely it is there's legal action to close those specific lacunae. Secondly, he says there's incentive for you to bias for a certain product or a certain range of providers. But that's not true, because if you bias toward a specific product or range of providers, that means you lose business from the others as well, right? You have an incentive as a website to be like a sky scanner, to provide a neutral, balanced range of products available to you that give you maximum profit, maximum revenue from all these different advertising sources and different possible sponsorship sources. Third nuance here, they say that you can just rebrand and close down your website, right? This is entirely information. But rebranding isn't cost-free, especially in the internet environment where there are so many websites competing for attention and for information. You have to work your way back up the rankings again, work your way back up the search algorithm again. So broadly speaking, there are strong incentives for you to at least be reliable in the long term, or at least for a set of these websites to be reliable enough. And that set of websites tends to be the first hit you get on Google and the one you're likely to go to, therefore. Secondly, we think that no one makes a once and for all decision to act on the information they read on the website, right? So then if you look at the website and say, oh my god, I got cancer, let's go next stage of the chemotherapy, right? Generally speaking, people find out more when they see that the range of options is available to them. Crucially, you need to have these sources alongside government websites. Here's why, right? So I'll like strawman this. Oh, it's like everyone's a vaccine. If everyone's a vaccine denialist, it makes no difference. Yeah, but not everyone's like that, right? It's not like you're either conspiracy theorist or you're not. I think many people believe that government websites provide some information, but are skeptical, right? Like there's a fear, a general sort of skepticism about the status of big pharma, or whether or not this information is reliable. So what you want is a second opinion. You want to see a range of websites that all link to each other. See that this website has been certified to some degree by the NHS website as well. This website hasn't been generally reliable in terms of evidence. So it's a general consensus you get from the top hits that are usually reliable that pushes you towards making that decision. Thirdly, we asked you, what are the alternatives on that side of the house? Because the alternative is you want information, right? Because you're sick or you feel like you have an ailment. Your aunt comes up to you, right? Not the random person down the street John talks about, but like someone you know, a close relation who says, look, I've been doing this for the last 6 years of my life. I guarantee you this treatment works. Sweat it out, which is, by the way, a horrible idea. Don't do that. So the point is, when you have personal relations as a substitute for the information available, because the number of information sources online appear to be small, those information sources you're already reluctant to trust. It makes you more likely to default to those alternatives who give you worse information. So broadly speaking, like the information you get is just worse on that side of the house. That's worse for treatment on that by hypothesis of the opening case. Second, they say there are bad incentives that these e-health websites have. You have incentive to push products on you, and so on and so forth. Right? Two responses. Number one, that's generally true of healthcare providers as well. Who have an incentive to push drugs, that's the reason why antibiotics are hugely overprescribed. Who have an incentive to push procedures on you, that's why people go through lots of unnecessary checkups and unnecessary fusion procedures as well. So the complication of this is that you often assume healthcare providers are being objective, right? Which makes it even harder, ironically, to detect when they're pushing products on you. But secondly, this is a nuance of the argument. They say there's a check and balance against healthcare providers, such as doctors, to be held personally liable. It's a problem with this argument. Liability actually pushes you towards overprescription, right? Because lots of medications have marginal effects on you. If you don't prescribe that medication, you're seen as being neglectful. If you prescribe many more pills, even if each one of them has a marginal or vanishingly small effect, that makes you more likely to do this. So on the comparative, like their source is just worse for this, right? Altogether. So let's talk about professional treatment. the second broad category of things. They say, let's say, get it, you substitute. They say, even if you get it, it's complicated by preconception. Okay, 3 responses. Firstly, lots of people, there are different cases in this way, right? There are some people who don't need to go to the doctor, right? Who have a slight pain in their shoulder one day, or a mild symptom that they have to deal with in their control. And generally speaking, when you go to these websites, this is persuasive to go. So the response from clothing government is, well, that's not true because you see that it's a range of symptoms that makes you terrified. But generally speaking, right, if it's a relatively minor condition you have, you're already predisposed to thinking maybe it's nothing. Let's just get some confirmation from someone, right? It's like consulting with a GP who's there to sit with you and tell you it really is nothing. And generally these websites will then tell you, yes, this might be heart disease, so there's an incredibly small risk of that. So that bursts the bubble of paranoia you experience when people are ill, because people don't behave fully rationally when they're ill. But the response to seeing someone tell you that actually it's going to be all right is generally to feel a switch. But okay, let's agree that sometimes it will push people towards finding towards diagnosis. Right? This is the second class of people. There are many people who are in denial about or reluctant to believe that they are ill, right? Because being ill is a terrifying thing. It's terrifying to think that there's something wrong with your body might be failing you, and you might have spent many days in a hospital. Generally speaking, then, it's a good thing for this class of people to be able to see that actually, if you have symptom X, there's a good chance you should get that checked out, right? There's a good chance it's going to be heart disease. And it's not like these websites just tell you before. They also tell you you should consult your GP because, like, a lot of these treatments, all these conditions, as they point out, are just trivially solved by buying a pill. So broadly speaking, this pushes people in this category of individuals who are in denial about their possible illness towards seeking out medical treatment.
Okay, all of your arguments about websites having a reputation for a whole rely on patients being able to easily tell when they get a misdiagnosed that is marginal. That is incredibly difficult to do, and these people are using websites that often.
You're right, but statistically it emerges, right? When there's a large number of people going to this website, that suggests that on average, the individual isn't like being grossly misdiagnosed. On average, the advice they find is helpful. On average, they find across like the millions and millions of users, this pushes the websites up in the rankings on search algorithms, right? So our way of inferring is not by having a single individual tell, but by having big data tell, having mass of people statistically evince which websites are more reliable. Okay, third response. I think this actually pushes patients to make more careful decisions, right? So firstly, note again the comparative is the quackery of homeopathy and of what your relatives want you to do. But crucially, number one, when you're making expenditures because you're having treatments pushed on you, you tend to think a bit more carefully about where you're spending money, right? If anything, people become more rational when there's money involved and money to lose. Secondly, you become part of an ecosystem of websites because now you're on the internet, linking from website to website, see what people have said about this condition, rather than just staying within the preserve of a few relatives you know who have some ideas about how healthcare works. For these reasons, e-health is better, gives you more information, makes you make decisions better. Very happy to work with.
Thinking about speech, please welcome the member of government.
One side in this debate does not have a monopoly on the internet. We have a single government-run website. They have very many websites put up by private individuals. The question is not, are there websites saying you might be sick, here is what could happen, go to the doctor. The question is how that message is communicated. Because we have a government website that says, if you experience a shortness of breath and it doesn't diminish after you finish exercising, go see a doctor and they can diagnose you. Their website lists out all of the different conditions, because that's why people read them, and then people go into that doctor's office with a fixed opinion. And it's that fixed opinion and the resulting poor medical decisions that are taken that is the difference in today's debate. 3 points of rebuttal to the opening opposition and 2 points. First, why people go in with very strong opinions that are difficult for doctors to dislodge. Secondly, why that undermines the true constrained resources in the medical system, which is not the times of first-line, front-line GPs, but rather the specialist resources that are necessary to provide treatments that are based on high expense equipment or highly trained specialists. First off, the first argument we were told is there are special mechanisms to regulate these websites, namely lawsuits and the Google search algorithm. I will deal with each of these arguments in turn. First on lawsuits, just on a point of fact, in the US, most of these sites can't be sued because they're protected under the First Amendment. That's why, for example, you can have a homeopathy website, which, by the way, are a huge number of these sites, and they're legally protected and still allowed to say they're offering people legal advice. The worst case scenario is you get asked to put a little small print disclaimer in size 7 fonts at the bottom of the page saying, oh, this could be bothers, but it probably isn't. Second off, however, it's just worth noting that doctors have a much stronger risk of being sued regulatory incentive than these websites. Why? Because relationship is not one of care in the case of website. The website is just saying something. That's why Wikipedia doesn't have a legal obligation to be accurate, whereas a doctor has an obligation as your doctor to provide you with proper advice. So if you say the law is good at regulating, then we think it's stronger on our side. The second thing they say is, the Google search algorithm pushes people towards accurate material. I don't know how they can make this argument in the age of Trump and Breitbart. The Google search algorithm picks the things that are most popular. Those are the things that the wisdom of crowd selects as the most important. Typically, those are the things that are most sensational. And the most read medical articles on the news aren't, here is an accurate diagnostic process for when you have a shortness of breath. They are, extra glass of wine a week can give you a 50% higher probability of getting liver cancer. Those are the sorts of things that attract people's attention, the sorts of things that scare them, that are sensational. So we just don't believe that the selection mechanism that you talk about, namely accuracy, is what gets the most clicks on a search algorithm. I would suggest that all of our Facebook news feeds are a case in point here. The next thing they tell us is, but some people mistrust the state, so they won't trust your website. I just think that the incremental number of people who mistrust the state and won't read this website is not very high. Why? Because the people who mistrust the state are very well correlated with the people who don't trust the conventional medical system. So I suspect these are exactly the sort of people who are like, WebMD? What WebMD? I want web homeopath. So I just don't think there is a huge number of particularly rational people who would be likely to respond to this information in a nuanced and sensible way, but honestly put up by the fact that the website comes from the government. Secondly, I just think this is empirically bollocks. Like, I think many people don't trust the state, like the military and the banking system. I think most people trust the medical system. That's why the NHS is the most popular institution in this entire country. Then they say, the alternative is you go and ask your family and friends. This is interesting, but I think on both sides, people are going to go and ask their family and friends. Case in point, there's lots of information online about politics, nonetheless, we still discuss it with our family and friends. Because ultimately, we have an inherent bias to want to socialize our problems and ask questions. The difference is, are your family and friends more likely to say on our side of the house, oh my goodness, I don't know, I've never read anything about that, go see the doctor? Or on your side of the house, when they've read all this material and come in with loads of opinions about how you should treat this, and end up giving you more advice. We want on our side, your family and friends, to have one piece of information, which is if you feel ill, go see a doctor. That's what we give them. On your side, you give them an entire menu. So, why are people likely to go to the doctor with a strong set of opinions? 3 reasons. First off, I think we have an inherent bias as human beings to overcredit our own independent research over objective facts. Why is it from experts? Why is this the case? Well, I think it's just empirically observable, right? Why is it that so many people believe that immigrants are lazy when every single empirical study tells them that immigrants contribute net to the economy? Well, it's very simple, because they've seen someone being lazy and they overcredit that. In the same way, people overcredit things they read over the internet over the years of medical experience that someone else, namely a medical practitioner, has. Second, I think people are very unlikely to accept explanations for illnesses that say there is something wrong with your lifestyle. You should drink less, or you should engage in less stressful activity. I think the result of that cognitive bias is very often when the doctor tells them that, they will reach for the other explanation that they read on the internet that said it was something else that doesn't imply inconvenient changes to their life or that they have done anything wrong. That's a crucial point. Third, I think that people are just likely to focus on the worst case scenario because the extreme outcome jumps in people's mind. So I think when they experience some symptoms that might be associated with a common cold, but they think it could possibly be pneumonia, they're likely to overcredit that example because it would have a huge impact on them and triggers their self-preservatory instinct. The result is that people come into the doctor's office with a variety of opinions, many of which will diverge from that of the doctor. Here is why that is harmful, but first off, openly.
So, but those articles about drinking wine will still exist in your side of the house, if not on the eHealth website. The difference is you don't have a WebMD saying, by the way, you want to check up with your doctor.
Nice. I'm not saying that the Daily Mail medical section is going to be top of the list on our side and not on yours. What I'm saying is that the things that people select for when they read about health tend not to be the things that are most accurate. It tends to be the things that generate the most clicks, which tend to be the things that are most sensational. That's why good studies from the Times don't get the most clicks on news websites. Rather, it's like crazy shit from Breitbart. So, why is this especially harmful for the medical system? Context. Across all of the world, medical systems are incredibly scared of resources. And what I want to point out as a point of nuance here is that I think the most starved of resources are things like expensive machinery or highly trained specialists for the simple reason that those resources are in fairly short supply. Crucially, on their side of the house, they've wasted things more by having to allay patient suspicions. Why is this the case? 2 reasons. Because when a patient comes in with a view you disagree with, you have to change their mind. Partly because they need to buy into treatment as opening set, but more importantly because of the fear of litigation affecting you. Why is this? Because as a doctor, let's be clear, even if you get sued and you end up winning the suit, you waste a huge amount of time you could have spent being paid for treating patients. You undergo a huge amount of costs. You undergo a huge amount of potential reputational damage because people say that doctor is being sued publicly. The result is when faced with that terrible outcome, versus the low marginal cost of ordering an additional test or waiting a week to verify the symptoms, you obviously go for that. Here are 3 harms that arise from the mass tendency to engage in that. First off, a delay in getting people the treatment that they actually need based on the diagnosis of a medical practitioner, which allows their symptoms to worsen. Second, unnecessary resource consumption. In particular, in order to verify this person doesn't have the highly sophisticated or dangerous condition they think they do, you have to do things like testing, like using MRIs or heart scans or CAT scanners, all of which are in very short supply, or using specialist time, which is again incredibly constrained for the reasons I've already mentioned. The result is you end up wasting the most constrained resource, or worst case scenario, they just come back to the GP. So yes, someone's gone to see a GP once, which is a benefit, but now they're coming back again and again and again, and wasting time could be spent on other patients who have real needs. So use your scarce resource as well. But third and finally, you undermine trust in the doctor. When ultimately you have a disagreement between the patient and the doctor, that undermines the notion that the doctor is someone you can trust. Why does it matter? Because the doctor is someone who has to live a tough news, like you're living too stressful a lifestyle and you need to change. When you're less likely to take that, you're less likely to see cures to conditions. You're also less likely to go in the first place when you feel they're not someone you trust. Best case scenario, that means you go to lots of different doctors and lose the value deep patient relationship. Otherwise, you just don't go at all. And finally, you spread these beliefs to a friend, saying that doctor can't be trusted, I read it on the internet. Proud stand against ignorance on our side of house, in favour of the received wisdom of great doctors like our chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that speech. I'd like to welcome the member of the opposition.
Biggest problem that countries are facing with regard to healthcare at the moment is that healthcare costs are spiraling. There just isn't enough money to give people the treatment they need for their diseases. Therefore, the key issue in this debate is which side of the House is better able to explain what happens when people enter the treatment room, when they enter that first meeting with the doctor. What we tell you in extension is that when people come in thinking they're the experts, when people come in understandably worried about what they could potentially have, but now under the opposition model, know they could have this whole host of things which need a whole host of checks, it then puts a huge amount of pressure on doctors to provide these checks. One, because they know that if they don't, there's a great fear of lawsuits that could come their way. Two, because if they don't, these people aren't going to listen to their treatments that they could do otherwise. And this necessarily leads to the consequence of, one, for these individual patients, there being great delay in treating what they actually have. Two, on the wider macro level, huge amounts of money being misspent on very expensive treatments to satisfy the need of people who think they're experts, but who are not. And that's why what we tell you in Opposing Government is the most important thing. I want to firstly deal with the government and private clash, which for some reason just takes up the majority of the debate because everyone's got to seemingly gets quite distracted. Right? We hear from opening opposition that this is expensive and therefore the private sphere needs to do this. On the other hand, we hear from also opening opposition that it's kind of like Skyscanner. We just pull things together and then we provide that information. Controversial response to Opposing Government. If you're actually just pooling a huge amount of resources together, then maybe it's not that expensive for governments to provide, right? Maybe that's what needs to happen. But the real issue here, and it's the issue that we point out in a POI2 opening opposition, is what is the content of your websites, right? This opening opposition's case, and therefore followed by very well and very similarly by closing opposition, is based on the idea that these websites, right, are going to list every single symptom you can have, right? And opening opposition have a plausible reason why this might be the case, because we want people to understand what they could have and therefore go to the doctor as a consequence. What we tell you, building on the very correct model from opening government, which is, and they state correctly, we will say, like, you know, obviously if you something like small, where like if it definitely is this, here's what your solution is. By any doubt, otherwise we would just say go to the doctor. Brilliant model. We then go on to explain why that's important, right? Because now it's a case of what happens when you get to the treatment. So what is the issue? We say that doctors, for a huge array of reasons, are best placed to give you your treatment model, right? Because they're the ones who know the most, they're the ones who are best able to keep up with, even deliver it to you. To say, listen, don't worry about this. Here's how we're going to do this. First, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and be comforted by that. Note, by the way, there's actually lots of evidence that suggests that people who react to this kind of advice affects how their actual treatment then subsequently works out. I.e., if you actually buy into the doctor and you think that this is going to work, then you're more likely for that test to work, right? We've seen this in placebo effect, where people are given, say, drugs which they're told will be effective versus drugs that can't. We get more likely to get that on our side of the house. That builds on what Mike was talking about, why you need doctors' trust, right? But why is it that people under their side of the house are coming to doctors with their own conceived ideas on why is that bad? The first reason is, once you read, right, what these guys say, the reason that, sorry, I do need to deal with something. There was a good response from closing off at this point, right, which is they say that, hang on a minute, if you just say, guys, like you just go to the doctor in every instance, people aren't going to go to the doctor. They're like, what the hell, right? The problem you have on your side of the house is symptoms like headache, stomach pain, chest pain are symptoms of like hundreds and thousands of diseases, right? So therefore, on your side of the house, anytime anyone has anything, it tells them they could have cancer, right? So you have the opposite problem of people going, wait a second, like every time I go on website, it tells me I have cancer, right? I'm not going to listen to this, I'm just going to say, oh. What's more likely to happen on our side of the house, when you haven't got this model, because we're regretting it, right? And people generally trust doctors because they're being told and held up on the pedestal of people who are very well educated, who know what they're doing, and people care about their bodies, right? If there's even a risk that something bad could happen to me, especially in places where healthcare is free, I'm likely to just have that appointment in the first instance. So what happens now under their side of the house? People turn up and they say, look, because I'm so worried about what I have, but because I've read like this website that Teck and Darion have put together, I actually think I have this horrible disease, right? So even though you're telling me that this is just because I'm working too hard and I need to just relax a bit more, do a bit more exercise and come back in a month, I want a heart scan, I want a CAT scan to make sure it's not like a brain function has gone wrong. I want blood tests. What's the problem? Previously, if patients ever did that, they're not basing this on what they think, on something which they think is actually like legitimate, right? If it's your aunt who's told you that, for example, it's harder for that to be persuasive to you when compared to something which calls itself a doctor, right? Like a doctor website, MD website, right? Therefore, even if the doctor tells you otherwise, you're like, no, it's my body, I want to make sure I have these issues. But then importantly, what we also tell you on this, doctors have a very real fear of lawsuits. Why is that? Because now they know that people on the other side, these patients, right, have a range of options, right? And when people think that they have a range of options, it's a lot easier for them to bring a lawsuit because they can say, I told my doctor to do this scan, and they refuse to do it. I told them, right? And if something goes wrong, they have justified anger. And on the point of view of the doctor, it's not in their interest to get sued. Because even if they win the lawsuit, right, their reputation's been damaged, it costs a lot of money, and they're often have been pulled out of practice at that moment in time.
You didn't ask me about this possibility. It's not a defense the doctor can use in a court of law. That is to say, whether or not the patient asks for it, if he fucks it up, he's going to get sued anyways. The fear of a lawsuit happens even without this question.
No, it doesn't for the reason I just stated, which is the lawsuits come about because people trust doctors less because they think they know better based on these websites. And when they have a range of other options and they say, I went to Gigi and I said, I think I have a serious heart problem. She said it was stress, right? On the our side of the house, we don't do that because our website just says, go to the doctor, right? And that's what that issue is there. Moreover, we say a bunch of other consequences which get no response. We explain to you why there are unnecessary tests, which cost a huge amount of money, which deprive other people who actually need those tests from having it. They suffer. We explain to you why people who, instead of having the actual treatment they need, there's a delay because they think they know better until they get to the treatment the doctor prescribed, and that delay could be fatal, but at worst just costs lots more money. We told you why there's a decrease in general trust of doctors, which means on a macro level, people are not going to their doctors as often. People are listening to our other advice, they're listening to your websites, and therefore, again, leading to delays in treatment, increases in cost. No response on any of those materials. At the end of this debate, what we're able to show you is that even if the fewer people go to the doctor on our side of the house, they get better treatment for themselves, and they get better treatment for people in general, and therefore we're incredibly proud to regret this mission. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. I'd like to welcome the opposition whip.
I just want to be really clear about the big harm that Steve outlined here. He said that patients who are suffering from some symptoms might go to the doctor and say that based on the information that they've been able to find, they should have an MRI scan. If that patient then goes on to have a heart attack because the doctor says that that's stress, then they're able to have that recourse to be able to sue, something that would exist anyway, regardless of whether they've looked that up. But note the key harm here. The harm is that that individual who goes on to have a heart attack is then able to demand that they get an MRI scan and are actually given that attention. What they do is they say, we're going to consign everything to a 10-minute GP appointment where GPs often miss particular symptoms, where patients don't know how to describe everything that's occurring to them, and where they're likely to make mistakes and miss the full amount of information that people might better be prepared for conversations with their GP with. when they come in with some information as opposed to coming in totally blind. I'm going to look at 2 points in this speech. First, I'm going to look at what these sites look like. Secondly, I'm going to look at how this changes relationships with doctors. First, on what these sites look like. So opening opposition gives some general reasons about what people are likely to do once they have information. What we do is we talk about the specific incentives that act on sites in order to ensure that they provide quality information. So it's not just about where things appear in Google, although that is a part of it, but it's also about the fact that these sites, as part of their business model, are not only B2C businesses, which are selling directly to consumers by providing a service that is supported by ads, but they're additionally providing services to businesses as well. And that's where a large proportion of their revenue comes. So like Paul explained, it's like things like having databases of doctors who pharmaceutical companies have been able to use to contact those people. And that's an incredibly valuable thing for them. But that requires physician buy-in, and there's an incentive for a company like WebMD to ensure that they have the largest doctor network across the United States, so that when Pfizer wants to get in contact about a new potential pharmaceutical product, they're able to gain access to those doctors. What that means is that WebMD has the incentive to provide very useful information that's targeted not only to consumers, but also to doctors. So note that many GPs often learned their knowledge 20 years ago in a medical school and aren't completely up to date with all of the latest information, and they need that in a really digestible and easy to handle way. That's something that WebMD often enables doctors to do. And although this may sound crazy to some of you who don't know about how the system of general practitioners works, it is the reality, because the alternative is they're looking up an old copy of Gray's Anatomy or looking up things in the British Medical Journal's encyclopedic volumes, but those are harder to navigate and more difficult for doctors to use. What this means is there's an incentive to build up a network that's based on trust. And it's not just that someone might identify that WebMD misdiagnosed them. It's also that if there is a systematic abuse of this important relationship that these websites have as a holder of information, that's the sort of thing that all of the thousands of experts who are incredibly well informed on this topic are likely to mention. And it's an incredibly easy article to write about WebMD propagating nonsense. So it's much easier for these organizations to work with doctors. They often take suggestions from doctors. Where doctors are kept up with the latest research, they're often able to talk to these organizations and get them to be able to improve the information and knowledge that they have. There's a symbiotic relationship between the physicians that ensures that this information is more accessible. But we'd rather have this information out there and easy to access for consumers, rather than saying that they have to go to the doctor with every sort of symptom. We think it's good that they can look up and see that their shortness of breath may be related to other symptoms, and given the cause of those happening at once, they're able to better prepare themselves for that conversation. They say that we can just have government websites. I mean, government websites are usually terrible and difficult to navigate. They're difficult for consumers to be able to work with. I mean, look at the National Poison Centre website in the US. Like, it looks like it was designed by some kid in the 90s, rather than being a reasonable website that you would want people to be able to access when they have swallowed something which is poisonous. Like, it is good that we have websites which are easy for people to navigate and are optimized for search engines, so you're able to appear high up in results.
So, like, if it is true that certain information was on Netflix for patients to have, and we wanted them to discuss that with their GPs, I suspect it would find its way onto a government website. And to be honest, we can afford to pay one good web designer if we really need to.
So, John, this isn't a change debate, it's a regrets motion. So you're not allowed to caveat, we're going to hire the best web designer and get the best guy in. We have to talk about governments as they work, and governments given the sites that they create. And expecting that governments would have automatically stepped in and served an unmet consumer need in the absence of a good profit-driven alternative, that is incredibly unlikely, because governments, in the absence of these sites, wouldn't necessarily have innovated in this way and moved into that market. No, thank you. Now let's look at how this changes the doctor relationship. So closing government wants to talk a lot about people come in with a very specific idea of what their symptom is and self-diagnose their disease, and are inflexible in terms of being able to change that diagnosis when they talk to their doctor. This contradicted all of the material where they talk about how doctors are incredibly trusted and why people are still going to be driven towards going to those individuals. But furthermore, let's look at what you get on these sites. So you're not presented with, you definitely have bowel cancer. You're given a list of 20 diseases which are related to the symptoms that you're experiencing. So you usually don't have the idea of which one of those are. But what you do is you have a basic set of information, you know what the signs are to look for, and you're able to prime yourself for that conversation. So note that many of the terms that are used in diagnosis are relatively vague, and as a result, doctors don't necessarily know what to look for. if you may be having a heart attack, it's good that you're able to be pre-prepared as to what having a feeling of impending doom, one of the main symptoms that's characterizing that, looks like. And furthermore, given that people often experience diseases in different ways and we systematically misdiagnose certain individuals as a result of being part of population groups who are atypical, it's important that we have that information out there so people can access that in a customized way and have that database available to everyone. What do we hear on this? So they tell us that you're going to have massive amounts of overuse of specialist treatment as a result of the threat of suing. Paul pointed out first, and then OO repeated in POI, about why it is that it's clearly not the pre-knowledge that that individual has, because if you have a heart attack and your doctor hasn't provided that treatment, that's the point at which you might talk to your lawyer about not being treated properly, rather than going through that conversation because you knew something specific as a result of WebMD. So that suing still happens, and to the extent that they overuse that it leads to the same results. But furthermore, we think it's good that people are able to be prepared for that conversation, are able to look for specific symptoms that might be important to those diseases that GPs might otherwise miss if they have a general probing 10-minute conversation, and are able to demand things which are likely to improve their quality of life. These services are clearly good. Governments are bad at designing websites, and doctors are still going to be sued under either side of the house.
Thank you for that speech.